Welcome back, everyone. We've had a lot of requests to really dig into this story about Barron Trump and a young girl named Emma. And, well, the source material is something else.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It reads like, I don't know, almost like a fictional story, but we're going to treat it as factual for this deep dive and see what we can uncover.
Interesting approach.
It all kind of revolves around Emma's funeral. The text doesn't give a specific date, but it paints a really vivid picture of the scene.
Right, like setting the stage.
Yeah, exactly. Church bells tolling, a light rain falling, everyone dressed in somber colors. And into this scene walks Barron Trump. Kind of unexpected, wouldn't you say?
Unexpected, yeah, that's one way to put it. What strikes me is the contrast. Here's this figure who's usually surrounded by media, spectacle, all that, and he arrives so quietly, alone, just carrying a bouquet of white roses. It's
Subtle.
very subtle, and I think it speaks volumes about the kind of presence he maintains throughout this whole story. Unassuming, sincere, almost like he's trying to blend into the background.
It makes you wonder what was going through his mind at that moment. The text really emphasizes that this wasn't about attention-seeking or anything like that.
No, not at all.
It was about Emma. So tell me, who was she? What's her story?
Well, Emma was a young girl, and she died tragically in a car accident. The source material really goes out of its way to paint a very clear picture of her personality.
Okay, like what kinds of things does it say?
She was kind, always the one to make people laugh, a true friend to everyone, and she dreamed of becoming a teacher.
It's heartbreaking, and you can really feel the impact she had on those around her, their friends, especially her younger brother, Jacob. He was just devastated, wasn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. The text mentions him clinging to a teddy bear throughout the entire funeral.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a really powerful image.
So Jacob plays a key role later in the story, but before we get to that, let's talk about Barron's interaction with Emma's parents, Linda and Greg.
Yeah, that's a crucial part.
They're obviously shattered by their loss, and Barron's appearance just catches them completely off guard.
Complete.
It's a powerful moment in the text.
Yeah.
They're speechless. Linda is just overcome with emotion, and it's Greg who finally manages to ask what everyone's thinking. Why are you here?
Yeah, I mean,
There's such a weight to that question, isn't there? It's a disbelief, but also curiosity.
absolutely. And Barron's response is very simple, but it's also incredibly profound. He says, I read about Emma, her story. It touched me. I felt I needed to be here.
Wow.
And I think this is where we start to see the real core of the story. You have this young man shielded by wealth, privilege, all of that, and yet he connects with this raw human experience of grief and empathy.
It's a moment of genuine vulnerability.
Reverently.
And then comes the letter.
Yeah, the letter.
Out of nowhere, Barron reveals that he brought a handwritten letter for Emma. It's such a striking detail. I can only imagine the wave of emotions that must have swept through everyone present.
You can practically feel it in the text.
The whole crowd goes silent. Everyone's leaning in, completely captivated, as Barron asks if he can read the letter aloud. It starts with, Dear Emma, I never met you, but I feel like I know you.
And from there,
He goes on to describe how her smile, her kindness, her dreams, how they've left a mark on the world.
it's incredibly moving.
It's so poignant. He talks about the fragility and beauty of life, and he promises to carry her story with him.
It's like he's trying to make sense of it all.
The text really emphasizes the impact of his words. Linda and Greg are openly sobbing. The crowd is weeping. It even describes the birds outside the church seeming to mourn along with them. It's a lot to take in, but it really does make you think about the power of words,
Right.
the way they can articulate this shared sense of grief.
You're right. It's like Barron's words are giving voice to their collective grief, offering some solace in the midst of this profound loss.
Exactly. And it's in this incredibly charged moment that Jacob steps forward, still clutching his teddy bear.
Oh, man, this part gets me every time.
It's heartbreaking. He asks Barron in this small, heartbroken voice, Did you really write that for my sister? And then he asks if Barron can give the teddy bear to Emma in heaven.
Oh, wow.
It's just heart-wrenching.
And what's remarkable is that Barron doesn't hesitate, not for a second. He promises Jacob that he'll make sure Emma gets it.
That's
It's a seemingly simple act
but incredibly powerful.
in its sincerity.
It really highlights the genuineness of his intention.
Absolutely.
And then, as if things couldn't get any more emotional, Emma's best friend, Lily, steps up.
This is where the music comes in.
She has a guitar and wants to sing Emma's favorite song.
Wow.
I'm actually curious, is this like a common thing at funerals to have these kinds of personal tributes?
It does happen, yeah, though it's not always so spontaneous.
Yeah.
But in this case, it definitely adds another layer of emotional depth to the narrative.
Yeah, for sure. So Lily's voice is shaky at first,
Understandably.
but the raw emotion that she pours into that song, it's palpable. You can feel it, and it's moving everyone present.
Even Barron's usually stoic bodyguards, right?
Yeah, even them. And then what happens next is just, well, it's surprising. Barron asks to join her. He takes the guitar and starts to play.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, at first, the notes are a bit clumsy. You can tell he's not a professional musician or anything. But then they find their rhythm,
Wow, this is incredible.
and they end up creating this impromptu, emotionally charged duet.
You won't hear that every day.
It leaves a lasting impression on everyone. It almost feels like a turning point for him, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. The music becomes a conduit for their collective grief, you know?
Yeah.
It goes beyond words to express something much deeper.
It's like a shared language of emotion.
Exactly.
And as the ceremony comes to a close, we get this poignant image of Linda, Emma's mother, walking up to Barron, taking his hand, and thanking him for giving them hope.
It's a simple gesture.
But it speaks volumes, don't you think?
Yeah.
About the power of human connection in the face of tragedy.
Absolutely. And Barron's response is also very revealing. He says, Emma's story gave me hope too. She reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there's light. It's like we're getting a glimpse into his inner world.
A vulnerability you don't often see from someone in his position.
Exactly. And that's where we'll pause for now, but there's so much more to unpack in this story. The impact of this encounter, the ripple effects of their shared grief. It goes way beyond the walls of that church.
It really does. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore the aftermath of this emotional funeral and the surprising turns this story takes.
So as people are starting to leave the church, Linda and Greg, they approach Barron again. It's like they're drawn to him. You know, like they need to understand why he's there.
Yeah, there's this lingering question, this why, hanging in the air. Why would Barron Trump, someone with no apparent connection to Emma or her family, be so deeply affected by her story?
It's a good question, and I think it makes you really think about the nature of empathy,
Mm-hmm.
how it can bridge these seemingly vast divides. Linda actually expresses this directly. She asks Barron, point blank, why did you come? You didn't know Emma. You didn't know our family. And Barron's response, well, it's incredibly revealing.
Okay, what does he say?
He says, I didn't know her, no. But I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like the world doesn't see you for who you are. That's a pretty loaded statement, don't you think? Especially coming from someone in his position.
It definitely adds another layer to his presence at the funeral. It's not just about empathy for Emma. It's about this shared experience of feeling unseen, misunderstood.
Exactly. And Greg, Emma's dad, he picks up on this too. He points out that Barron is anything but invisible. I mean, he's constantly in the public eye.
Right.
But Barron pushes back. He says, they see a name. They see what they want to see. But Emma's story, it reminded me of something real, something I've been missing. He's acknowledging this disconnect between his public persona and his true self.
Wow. So in Emma's story, he finds a sense of authenticity, a connection to something genuine that's been missing in his life.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
And it makes me wonder if that resonates with other people who feel similarly unseen, regardless of their background.
I think you're right. It speaks to this very universal human need for connection and belonging. We all want to feel seen and understood.
Absolutely. And this whole theme of authenticity, it's further underscored by what happens next with the photographer.
Oh yeah, the photographer.
Yeah.
This is where things take a really interesting turn.
So this photographer approaches Barron with a candid photo he took during the funeral.
Okay.
The photo shows Barron kneeling in front of Emma's casket holding Jacob's teddy bear. And there's this ray of sunlight like breaking through the clouds and illuminating him. It's a striking image full of symbolism.
You can practically feel the photographer's intent when you read this part of the text.
Mhm.
He feels very strongly that the world needs to see this image.
Like it represents something important.
Yeah, something hopeful, something healing. Initially, Barron hesitates. He wants to keep the moment private, but eventually he agrees. He says that if the photo can help someone, then it should be shared.
And that's exactly what happens, right?
Oh yeah, this photo goes viral.
And it sparks all sorts of reactions.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are moved by Barron's compassion. They see it as a genuine act of kindness. Others are more skeptical. They question his motives. It just shows you how differently people can interpret the same event, especially when it involves a public figure like Barron.
That's so true.
But you know what's really striking? The most powerful responses come from people who've experienced loss themselves. parents who've lost children, siblings grieving a loved one. They connect with the raw emotion captured in that image.
So it becomes the symbol of shared grief and understanding.
Exactly.
The text mentions that Linda and Greg, they're flooded with messages of support, letters, flowers, even donations to charities in Emma's name. It's incredible.
Like this collective outpouring of empathy, all triggered by this one photo.
And there's one message in particular that stands out.
Oh, tell me about this one.
It's from a young woman who was contemplating suicide, but after seeing that photo, she changed her mind. It really underscores the power of human connection, right? And the ripple effect that even the smallest acts of kindness can have. We often underestimate how much our actions can impact others.
It's true, and it's at this point in the story where we see things shift from this very personal grief to a much wider impact.
Right. Emma's story, amplified by Barron's actions in that viral photo, it starts to inspire others. It creates the sense of hope that extends beyond the immediate tragedy.
It's a powerful example of how individual actions can resonate on a larger scale, and it leads to another significant development, the establishment of a foundation in Emma's name.
This is something I wanted to ask you about. Tell me more about this foundation, its purpose. It seems like a very deliberate step towards creating a lasting legacy for Emma.
That's exactly what it is. The foundation aims to support grieving families and children in need. And Barron works very closely with Linda and Greg, and even Jacob, to make sure that Emma's memory lives on in a tangible way.
And how does Jacob react to all of this? I imagine it must be pretty meaningful for him to see his sister's memory honored in such a significant way.
His reaction is incredibly heartwarming. He's just overjoyed. He says that now his sister will never be forgotten. And it really speaks to the importance of remembrance, of keeping the memory of loved ones alive through positive action.
It's a beautiful sentiment. And it also highlights how this foundation becomes a way for everyone involved to channel their grief into something positive, something that helps others.
I agree. The foundation becomes this tangible manifestation of their collective desire to make a difference in the world.
Right.
And for Barron, it marks a real turning point. We see him stepping into this new role, using his platform and his resources to actually create positive change. It makes you wonder if this whole experience shifted his perspective on his own privilege and responsibility.
It's a valid question. And speaking of shifts in perspective, the text mentions a phone call that Barron receives from his father, and it really sheds light on their relationship.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this phone call is a pivotal moment. It reveals this whole dynamic between them that we haven't seen before.
So what happens?
His father expresses pride in Barron's actions. He says that he's grown, that he's always had a big heart.
Oh,
And for Barron, this kind of affirmation, it's rare, almost unheard of.
so it's like a breakthrough in their relationship.
It really is.
Yeah.
A sign of recognition and approval that he's clearly been longing for.
And it's a reminder of how our actions can ripple outward in unexpected ways, impacting not just those immediately involved, but also those closest to us.
I think you've hit on something really important there.
And I wonder if this newfound validation from his father influenced Barron's subsequent actions.
That's a fascinating thought. And speaking of actions, we can't overlook Barron's decision to write his own letter to Emma.
Oh, right. Inspired by Jacob's note to his sister.
Exactly. It's like writing has become this way for him to process his emotions, to connect with Emma's memory on a much deeper level.
So what does he say in this letter? I'm curious about the kind of language he uses, the sentiments he chooses to share.
Well, he starts by expressing his gratitude for how she's changed his life. He talks about the lessons he's learned, kindness, connection, the power of small acts to make a difference.
That's beautiful.
And he thanks her for showing him the light in the darkest moments and promises to never forget her. It's a deeply personal, heartfelt letter.
It really does speak volumes about the profound impact Emma's story has had on him.
It does. But the story doesn't end there. Barron returns to the cemetery one last time, alone this time, carrying a white rose and Jacob's letter.
It's like a pilgrimage, almost. A way to say goodbye and honor Emma's memory in a private, personal way.
I agree. He places the rose on her headstone, reads Jacob's letter aloud, and then something remarkable happens.
What is it?
A butterfly with bright yellow wings lands on the rose. It lingers for a moment and then flutters away.
That's such a beautiful image, almost symbolic of Emma's spirit finding peace and taking flight.
It ties the story together with this sense of closure and hope.
And as time goes on, the foundation flourishes. It's fueled by public support and Barron's unwavering dedication.
They fund scholarships, they support grieving families, they create spaces for children like Jacob to find solace and healing. It's amazing to see how one girl's story amplified by these unexpected acts of kindness and a viral photograph, has created such a widespread positive impact.
It really is.
And throughout it all, Barron remains dedicated to the Foundation's mission. He often reflects on Jacob's wish for people to remember his sister, not just for a day, but always.
It's clear that Emma's story has left an indelible mark on him, shaping his values and giving him a new sense of purpose.
You can see it in everything he does. And this newfound sense of purpose, it becomes strikingly evident during a televised interview about the Foundation. When asked why he was so deeply moved by Emma's story, Barron pauses, takes a moment to gather his thoughts, and then responds with this simple yet profound statement.
This is the part that really got to me. What did he say that was so powerful?
He said, because she reminded me that every act of kindness, no matter how small, it can change the world. She taught me that love and compassion, those are the greatest legacies we can leave behind.
It's such a simple message, but so profound.
It really is.
And the text mentions that people saw a different side of Barron Trump that day, a side that went beyond the name, the public persona.
Absolutely. The interview humanized him in a way we hadn't really seen before. He wasn't just a political figure or a name in the headlines. He was a young man who had been touched by tragedy and was now using his experience to try and make a positive difference.
It really makes you think about the power of these personal stories, to shift perceptions and create connections where you might not expect them.
It does. And it also highlights the importance of authenticity, of speaking from the heart and letting go of those preconceived notions.
So looking back at this whole story, what do you think is the biggest takeaway? What can we learn from Barron Trump and Emma?
That's a good question. I think it speaks to the enduring power of human connection, even in the face of unimaginable loss. It reminds us that even the smallest acts of kindness can have this ripple effect, creating positive change that extends far beyond ourselves.
It's a powerful reminder that even in a world that often feels divided and cynical, there's still room for compassion, empathy, hope, all those good things.
It also prompts us to consider how our own actions, no matter how small they may seem, can contribute to a more compassionate world. What seemingly insignificant acts of kindness might we undertake that could have a similar ripple effect?
Yeah, what could we do? That's something worth thinking about.
Definitely.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with me. This story, it's been both heartbreaking and hopeful, a real reminder of the complexities of the human experience.
It has. Thanks for having me.
Until next time, everyone, keep those questions coming and we'll keep digging into these stories together.